The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.
Greetings, everybody. Armor of Truth Live number 219. Welcome to the show. It is your host, Brad from Carolina, along with Summer from Atlanta. Say hello.
Hi, everybody.
And we're here with you tonight for another dangerous one. So enjoy us while we're here, because who knows how long this is going to last. It does appear that there is a conspiracy of scientists afoot, H.L. Mencken said. Their purpose is to break down religion, propagate immorality, and reduce mankind to the level of the brutes. They are sworn and sinister agents of Beelzebub, who yearns to conquer the world, said H.L. Mencken, who was no fan of religion. These conspiracy scientists, or this conspiracy of scientists that Mencken is talking about, is a conspiracy of knowledge. A long-planned, well-orchestrated, highly detailed subversion of information and a redefinition of reality by monopolizing, manipulating, distorting, and exploiting knowledge to save the world. Christianity has often been accused of opposing science and hindering technology throughout history. Now, this is through superstitious ignorance, the scientific elite would say. But a closer look at historical facts shows that this is a silly accusation. It's ill-founded. It's not based in truth. Those who believe, for example, in the theory of evolution, often accuse Christians who affirm creation of believing, of being superstitious. But there is no history or modern scholarship to support the claims that Christians were anti-science at any point. And the Bible doesn't teach such a worldview. Utopian wizardry, the manifestation of possibilities, the immanentizing of the eschaton, or seeing yourself as God and bringing heaven to earth, where heaven is defined as global unity under egalitarian justice. Tolerance means no dissent whatsoever. And the promise of limitless progress and 72 virgins for all of the secular faithful. What we see is classified as Philip and Paul Collins in their books, in their writings, as an epistemic autocracy, scientific dictatorship. It's where the ruling class seizes control of science and uses it as an epistemological weapon against the masses. saying that public policy could itself become the captive of this scientific technological elite, said President Eisenhower in his farewell address in 1961. That's part of the farewell address that often gets overlooked. But this is the nature of the conspiracy as it exists today. It is a scientific, technological elite waging a war of ideas, waging a war of knowledge, waging a war of science. And it's fought through a technocratic priesthood that worships what was initially God-given, an instrument for the broadening of human understanding, ideas, knowledge, science, all these are inhabitants of the mind, which is the ultimate battlefield. Only within the mind can the ruling class achieve their final objective, which is ultimately apotheosis, they think, but the recreation of man in the image of their God. This is the contamination of true science. Radical empiricism, metaphysical naturalism, Malthusianism, Darwinism, radical environmentalism, all cosmetically renovated to appear as though it's objective science. And it paves the way for the reintroduction of the hidden God of the ancient mysteries. You'll find occultism hidden throughout even the topics we're going to talk about tonight. Ostensible control over the knowable by marketing institutionally accredited science as the only path to true understanding. Discouraging independent reason while exercising illusory power over human knowledge. The tactic of control through knowledge suppression and selective dissemination is reiterated in this document, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which you'll find this quote. It says, "All science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge. The end is control. And control is wielded by an epistemological cartel, a ruling class that has suborned the bookkeepers or the social scientists. Meanwhile, the masses practically deify these experts that appear on television and most sadly remain ignorant of the methodology at hand. Under a scientific dictatorship, education will really work, says Aldous Huxley, with the result that most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. And that is the ultimate objective. The ultimate objective of this scientific elite, this oligarchy legitimized by arbitrarily anointed expositors of knowledge, or in Huxley's own words, the scientific dictatorship, programming the masses for their comfortable assimilation into just such a dictatorship. In other words, science, even science fiction, has been occupied, commandeered, and then sold back to you as scientism, posing as the truth. Even science fiction literature, like Brave New World, is instrumental in the indoctrination of the masses into the doctrines of the elite. Only when people think they're not buying something can the real sales pitch begin. It's conditioning of the masses to accept future visions that the elite wish to tangibly enact, or predictive programming. So science fiction has also worked to propagate this, mixing with the sciences in public discourse to present an infallibly accurate vision of how the world is going to look in the future. Idea is that it's useless to resist this central establishment control. this blackening, this pollution of the earth is as unavoidable as entropy. Extinction, or evolution, of the species is inevitable, they say. And as such, memes become self-fulfilling prophecies. The elite's occult Darwinian doctrine, the science fiction concepts of utopia and dystopia, are really Hegelian terms for the same thing, a socialist totalitarian system. Ideas like the Gemini program and the Apollo programs worked together to legitimize science as all truth. And over the decades, this has done nothing but become more and more ingrained in the public mind. The metaphysical underpinnings of their worldviews, metaphysical naturalism, the notion that life originated from lifeless matter, abiogenesis, life from non-life. And they want to say they have the truth, that they're epistemologically sound. Their worldview excludes the involvement of a supernatural creator, and therefore nature becomes a god creating itself. The Apostle Paul wrote in Romans chapter 1, verse 25, they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Occult concepts presented in science today, similar to the Hebraic Kabbalah. 33rd degree Freemason Albert Pike revealed that all the Masonic associations owe to it, the Kabbalah, their secrets, their symbols. And we'll leave it right there for now. Just to whet your appetite on that. We'll come back to that later in different shows. But today we're talking about all of this is the background, nanotechnology, nanoparticles, the new nano-lords. Nano, right? Given the way the elites and their servants, the politicians and unelected experts who tell them what to do, have behaved since about 1995 and surely since September 11th, 2001, but most definitely since about March of 2020, the arrival of and the prospects of nanotechnology does not immediately cause a warm glow in my spirit. So please pay very close attention to what we're going to tell you here tonight. We are in a new world with completely new possibilities. Things are possible today that were not even imaginable to even the brightest minds 100 years ago. There is today a new realm of science. In a sense, there is a new universe that is so bizarre, so curious, so very esoteric, that even though it is verifiably existent, there isn't a person alive who understands it well enough to tell you what it is. Basically, true nanoparticles operate in the quantum realm, which may as well be a magical cave in a fictional land, because in reality, there is no person in the world who understands the quantum realm. One of the new nanotechnologies that we'll talk about here in just a moment is using bees as surveillance. Right? And it's presented as though this is a great idea. Bees plus state surveillance. This is how it ends, folks. Someday, we'll smile if we're still capable in our new status, recalling our childhood fears of mechanical robots gaining autonomy and making us their slaves. So as we start here tonight, let's share this quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn with you. In our age, when technology is gaining control over life, when material well-being is considered the most important goal, when the influence of religion has been weakened everywhere in the world, true religion, that is, a special responsibility lies upon the writer, the reporter, those who, for whatever reason, have taken a platform or have been given a platform or have the opportunity to do as we're doing here with you tonight. It's very important, as long as these platforms allow us to come here and tell the truth. Now, what that means for us, all relevant truth begins in the scriptures. So everything that we tell you here comes through that lens. So the question here tonight in the title is, will God end the nanotechnology Tower of Babel? To hear a lot of Christian YouTubers, a lot of people who talk about Bible prophecy, talk about what's going on in the world, to hear many folks talk about this, you would think that God had been caught off guard by what's going on. What is the truth? Who is sovereign? Who is in control over technology? How do we as Christians think about technology? What is God's relationship to it? Later in the show tonight, we'll come back around to that topic after we've introduced these issues to you, and we'll finish it up with a nice understanding, a proper theology of technology. As we start out here tonight, we want to look at an article from Newsweek that popped up this week on the 30th. Check out this. What do you think about this? It's time for the scientific community to admit we were wrong about COVID-19. Do we have a...
We're getting some glitching.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Well, as long as we're working, I think I'll try to keep an eye on that. Guys are you guys in the chat? Give us, if you can, help Summer out and give her a report there on what you... If you're able to see and hear us, okay. I'm thinking that's probably in the cables that are coming from here to the ATEM there. Keep an eye on it. Look at this article, folks. It's time for the scientific community to admit we were wrong about COVID and it cost lives. Now, this is an op-ed. That means it's an opinion editorial. What is going on here? We're seeing this happen now in the mainstream. Newsweek published an op-ed this week that on the surface looks like cracks have formed in the official narrative. In the title, you see here, a medical student from Texas offers a confession. It's time for us to admit we were wrong about COVID and it cost lives. So, come on now. What is this? What are we looking at here? Should we take this at face value, or is there something else going on here? Well, let's be real about one thing. Let's be real about everything. But let's be real about this thing first. The official narrative. We're talking about the pandemic narrative. We're not talking about whether or not a virus exists or where it came from. That's not the point right now. The official narrative that you hear about all of this from the hyper-real world of your screens has been falling apart now for months. You could even say it's been falling apart since 6 months into it. Is this a genuine op-ed from a sincerely concerned party reporting it in mainstream Newsweek? Or could this be a limited hangout? Or a little bit of both? The way a limited hangout works, just set this definition down for us. A limited hangout. If you're an intelligence agency or a government, or maybe you're the CDC, I don't know, or a global corporation or a non-governmental organization, you've been doing things that you don't want people to know, things that need to be hidden from the public. Well, inevitably, those things do start to come to light. Even things like JFK, those things eventually do come to light. Even things like 9/11, those things do come to light, and they will. In the public, it'll take 50 years after the event. That's usually about how long it takes for all the documents to be declassified for any major event like that. Eventually, it will come to light, but sometimes word gets out much sooner than you expected. See, the idea when there's a major psychological operation, if it's nationwide or some kind of hidden revolution, something that a group, an agency, or a group of elites or whatever want to achieve something, but they don't want anyone to know exactly what happened or how they achieved it, or that it was they who did it. When these things, when it starts to come to light, and it gets to the point where it just can't be denied anymore, what you do is you go ahead and release a little bit of the story. You release a limited part of the story, i.e., the story of whatever it is you're doing, right? A limited information. For example, Edward Snowden a few years ago, when he came out and exposed the NSA. Did he? Really? There wasn't any information that he released that wasn't already publicly available. But what had happened was the system had been breached. Some secrets had been exposed. So what you do is you take that and go ahead and hold out a person who's going to play the role of the hero or the villain, depending on your perspective. And they release the information that you're comfortable with the public having, so that the public feels like it got the story and they will go on about their business. Meanwhile, the important stuff is left behind. This article is going to be a perfect example of that. Not questioning whether or not Kevin Bass, the one who wrote the op-ed, is sincere or not. I don't know. I'm going to assume he is. I'm going to assume the best of him. But those who are in charge, who asked him to do it. But the part you release when you do this is called the limited hangout. It's not a lie. It's just not the whole story. You hang it out there so that it will become the whole story. And thus, you stop people from pursuing the whole story. That's the idea. You want the masses to respond to this. Folks like us, we know what this is, but we already had the story. They want to keep the masses from getting onto it. Victor Marchetti, a former special assistant to the deputy director of the CIA, who went on to become a critic of the intelligence community, described the tactic this way in 1978. He said, "A favorite and frequently used gimmick of clandestine professionals, the limited hangout. When their veil of secrecy is shredded and they can no longer rely on a phony cover story to misinform the public, they resort to admitting, sometimes even volunteering, some of the truth while still managing to withhold the key and damaging facts in the case. The public, however, is usually so intrigued by the new information that it never thinks to pursue the matter any further. And this usually works. Let's check this article and see what we find. First of all, who is the person who's written the article here? Who has mainstream Newsweek given access to their global platform for releasing news? This is Kevin Bass. He is an MD, PhD student at that's not what I wanted. There we go. At a medical school in Texas, and he's in his 7th year. Newsweek does remind everyone at the bottom of this article and say, the views expressed in this article are the writer's own. So, there we go. We got the glitch. The glitch again. I'll see what I can do here. Bear with us for a second, folks. I'll try to figure this out.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity
All right. Check 1, 2.
to new heights.
Check 1, 2.
To create a
All right, I think we're back after that break. Boy, I wonder what's going on here. Are we getting a little bit of resistance? Interesting. Sorry about that. Well, let's get back into it here. The Newsweek article from this medical student begins this way. It says, as a medical student and researcher, here we go, I staunchly supported the efforts of the public health authorities when it came to the thing. I believe that the authorities responded to the largest public health crisis of our lives with compassion and diligence, scientific expertise. I was with them when they called for lockdowns, vaccines, and boosters. I was wrong. We in the scientific community were wrong, and it cost lives. I can see now that the scientific community, from the CDC to the World Health Organization to the FDA and their representatives, repeatedly overstated the evidence and misled the public about its own views and policies, including on natural versus artificial immunity, school closures and disease transmission, aerosol spread, mask mandates, and vaccine effectiveness and safety, especially among the young. All of these were scientific mistakes at the time, not in hindsight. Amazingly, some of these obfuscations continue to the present day, but perhaps more than any individual error was how inherently flawed the overall approach to the scientific community was and continues to be. It was flawed in a way that undermined its efficacy and resulted in thousands, if not millions, of preventable deaths. Okay. Well, right? That seems to be saying what a lot of us have been thinking for a long time, right? Well, the censorship and the psychological narrative ever since early 2020 anyway, a lot of us, that's how we feel, right? He's really speaking to me, right? This guy has got it right, doesn't he? Seems to be exactly what all of us who have been shamed and hated for 3 years want to hear. But We must read on with our brains engaged because there are problems. There are problems here. Let's see, we move on down to this part of the article here. Toward the end is where it gets a little shaky. We have witnessed a massive and ongoing loss of life in America due to distrust of jabs and the healthcare system. A massive concentration in wealth by already wealthy elites, a rise in suicides and gun violence, especially among the poor, a near doubling of the rate of depression and anxiety disorders, especially among the young, a catastrophic loss of educational attainment among already disadvantaged children, and among the... Are you feeling it? Are you catching the narrative? It's hitting all the points. Sorry about that. Continuing now. A massive loss of trust in healthcare, scientific authorities, and political leaders more broadly. So, well now, did you catch it? By the way, over at exposenews.com, Rhoda Wilson responded to this as well. I'll share a few of her points here. So due to distrust of vaccines, he says here, this piece here says, which is what caused one of the problems right here, due to distrust of vaccine. Well, you can't see that, can you? Right here. You can see it. So that was linked to an article from the University of Minnesota titled U.S. Pandemic Death Toll Higher Than in 20 other peer countries. We're not going to go into that at the moment. Just suffice to say it was official narrative. And that article claimed that the pandemic had less of an impact on in the most vaccinated states in the Delta and Omicron surges. The phrase from this piece here, and the healthcare system, that you can see where they're linked here, right here, this, and the healthcare system, was linked to this PBS NewsHour article right here. From February of last year, 2022, detailing an interview with Dr. Jennifer Nuzzo. The interview aimed to explain why the COVID death rate was higher in the U.S. than in any other wealthy nations. The COVID injections played a central role throughout the interview. Here is an excerpt. I'm going to try to jump to that part in the interview.
More than 2 years into this pandemic, the U.S. death toll is the highest in the world. The country is closing in on 900,000 deaths, and its death rate is alarming, particularly...
What accounts for this high death rate, the U.S., as compared to its peer nations?
I mean, first of all, we have to acknowledge that it's a complete and utter tragedy because the vast majority of these deaths have been preventable because many of them have occurred, in fact, most of them have occurred since the development of COVID-19 vaccines. But what we're really seeing is the effect of the United States not making enough progress in vaccinating adults against the virus, and people who are not protected from severe illness by vaccine are unfortunately the ones most likely to die.
So there you go. That was what the article linked to.
So still pushing that narrative, but meanwhile, the princess of Thailand is in a coma. Remember that story that's come out?
Yeah.
And so they're cutting their contract with Pfizer, and then in Singapore, they're actually giving out injury payouts.
Yeah, so a lot of things happening around the world. But what Newsweek, now that's why this looks like a limited hangout. What Summer has just reported to you there is not things you're going to find on Newsweek. But you will find this on Newsweek, where this medical student is giving a confession. And he is parroting the narrative. It looks like he's not. It looks like he's really calling them out for whatever, but no, you can see this article links to all of these official narratives. Let's continue. It gets a little worse. Considering the pro-jab nudge here towards the end of this article, this op-ed, and given the fact that at Davos this year, the World Economic Forum highlighted the need to restore trust in the public, as Rhoda Wilson writes, we would be forgiven for reserving the right to remain skeptical about the true meaning of the end of the Newsweek article. So the next piece here, right here. So Kevin Bass finishes up here. He says, my motivation for writing this is simple. It's clear to me that for public trust to be restored, right? Remember, folks, the World Economic Forum just last week or the week before last, whenever it was, that was one of the breakout sessions they had at the forum. Restoring trust. What are we going to do to restore trust? And then they come back this week with this article in Newsweek, right? How about that?
They run a tight ship. I'll give them that.
Yeah. How about that? Well, you can see what's going on here, right? He finishes, he says, restoring trust in public health and our democracy depends on it. We don't have a democracy. We have a representative republic. But for some reason, in the mainstream, you'll hear our democracy parroted over and over. Yeah, it's a type of democracy, but no. Our forefathers were very clear on that. Democracy is one of the worst kinds of ways to set up a government. More on that later. Well, you can see as a quick review of Kevin Bass's posts on Twitter. For example, this is his Twitter page profile. He's a medical student who, with the help of Newsweek's deputy opinion editor, Batya Ungar-Sargon, wrote this Newsweek. Let's see. So you get right here. He says, thanks to my editor, the amazing and brilliant name I just said there, Batya Ungar-Sargon, for this opportunity. This really is an understatement of what I owe to her. Batya is also an amazing writer in her own right, and her work is worth reading again and again. I have learned so much from her. Well, and this is her. Yeah, so I guess you would be thanking the deputy opinion editor for Newsweek if they gave you this. Now, look, you'll hear, you can see here on, you see over here to the right on her, in her profile, you know, author of Bad News, How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy, right? So they're on our side. However, CJ Hopkins on his Substack recently put out a piece called How to Memory Hole a PSYOP. And he says this. Let's get you some. There we go. How about that? How about there comes a time near the end of every PSYOP when the PSYOP has achieved its objective, or as much of its objective as it's going to achieve, and is becoming increasingly recognizable as a psychological operation. And so the focus shifts to damage control and erasing the PSYOP from official history. This is a crucial stage of the PSYOP because at this point, a significant percentage of the public have realized that they've been thoroughly, we can't say that word on this channel, but you know what we mean. And many of them are none too happy about it. Some of them are starting to ask awkward questions like, why were we deceived and coerced by our governments, global health authorities, and the state and corporate media into submitting to a series of experimental medical injections that appear to be killing and injuring a lot of people? At this point, it's way too late for those engaged in conducting the PSYOP to continue to deny the facts and continue gaslighting the masses. That's not going to work anymore. So Now it's time to do some limited hangouts and some whitewashing and a little sleight of hand and just generally confuse and distract the public and send them off on various wild goose chases, while the official story of the PSYOP is written. Once again, limited hangouts are an elegant means of preventing people from exposing your PSYOP. You just hang out a little bit, a limited part of the PSYOP, one that you know won't do you as much damage, and let the masses feed on that. They'll be so grateful to get a little part of the truth that they'll forget all about the other parts of it, the parts that matter.
And they'll work hard to negate all the other parts.
Right. So how do you go about that exactly? It isn't as complicated as you might imagine. All you need to do is pick the right journalists, plug them in, and let them do what they do. In fact, for this limited hangout, you're going to want to make sure that you get a medical student, and you're going to want to make sure you get a journalist and an editor who definitely appears to be conservative. Right. I'm not saying she's not sincere. I'm not saying she's not doing the right thing. I'm saying that this article, that this final production that you're seeing here is a limited hangout. It's a part of a psychological operation. And the best psyops always use dupes, people who don't know they're being used. They don't even need to be instructed or monitored. You know what they're going to report, right? And you know what they're going to avoid reporting. How official narratives are created and maintained. That's how it works. They're not created and maintained with magic or top secret mind control technologies. They are created and maintained with words. Words that appeal to emotions. Words that appeal to authority. Words that frame events in a certain way and are repeated and reprinted over and over by persons and organizations of influence until they become officially what happened. It works by conditioning us from a very early age to sense where the lines that cannot be crossed are, and by weeding out and quarantining those of us who cross them anyway. Us. The point is, the PSYOP that we have all been subjected to for going on 3 years is not going to be exposed, not ever. None of those who are responsible are ever going to be brought to trial. They'll be brought to justice, but it won't be in this life. And that's not good news for them. But the damage control and memory holding is going to continue. And the misdirections and the limited hangouts will continue. And the whitewashing of corporations, corporate media, and the papers of record will continue. And the PSYOP will be erased from history. And people will get used to their new injectables, like they got used to taking off their shoes at the airport. Now, C.J. Hopkins used the example. He was talking about other examples. One of those examples, he was specifically writing about the Twitter files. And he was also talking about this particular, this video right here. Let's watch this. Let's watch a few seconds of this. This came out also. This also came out right, I think, just before, a couple days before the Newsweek article came out. This went viral.
We're exploring, like, now, you know how the virus keeps mutating?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is, like, why don't we just mutate it ourselves? So
by the way, this is Jordan Tristan Walker. He is most definitely and without a doubt, no one could ever question that he is the Pfizer Director of Research and Development. Right? He's the strategic operations and mRNA scientific planning. That's who he is. It's just no one's going to question it because it says it right there on the screen.
we could create unfavorably develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that, though, there's a risk of, like, as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses.
Yeah.
So we're like, do we want to do this? So that's like one of the things we're considering.
Okay.
Like the future, like maybe we can like create new versions of the vaccines and things like that.
All right. So you get the deal here. So his excuse for what you're hearing him say right here was, okay, first of all, he's a gay man, if that wasn't evident right from the start. But he was on a date, and he says he was trying to impress the date. Right, because that's generally how you impress someone is by describing to them, explaining to them how Joseph Mengele you happen to be, right? Just how twisted, right? Anyway, this is once again, who knows for sure, but doesn't this feel an awful lot like the Newsweek article, an awful lot like a continuation of the limited Hangout? Again, folks, Davos had just ended, where they had just said we have to get the public's trust back, and then bam, bam, these two big stories come out and go viral. Not everywhere in the mainstream, because that would be too obvious. Just enough here and there. All right, so that's the. Let's see, that's the first part here, and then we move here. Now that is, let's see, we'll go right here. Now here is the Ken O'Keefe. This was Project Veritas. So here is the big Ken O'Keefe reveal. Here you go.
You work for Pfizer. My question for you is, why does Pfizer want to hide from the public the fact that they're mutating the COVID viruses?
Is this real life? I'm literally a liar. I was trying to impress a person.
Listen, if you were... wouldn't you just get up and walk out? All right, if this is legitimate, wouldn't you just get up and walk out? I don't know who this guy is, but it wouldn't shock me, it wouldn't surprise me a bit. What do you think, Summer? If it turns out that this guy here on the left, it's an actor.
Yeah. It strikes me as very stilted.
Right, and James O'Keefe here, it's a fact that they've done some things have been exposed before. Let's not be assuming that James O'Keefe can also be duped, or can just become part of.
But I mean, what follows is what's classic and the behavior that we're seeing everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Meltdowns.
Right. Yeah, let's go to the meltdown. By the way, just so you know, we hired Glenn Beck. We hired Glenn Beck.
He's on our show now.
Right. We hired
Just
Glenn
kidding.
Beck. Yeah, to narrate this part. And how funny is it, Summer? That, I don't know about funny, but how interesting is it? Glenn Beck is on board. He's on board. He believes the Newsweek story is legitimate, and he believes.
Yeah.
I watched this interview. He didn't question whether or not this was the director of worldwide research and development.
He is part of the machine.
Yeah.
He's a longtime veteran of the machine. Clear Channel. I've met him before.
Yeah, Summer's got a history in radio, and that's Beck's domain. Well, what do you think?
Well, let's watch the meltdown.
All right, here comes the meltdown, and once again, we got Glenn Beck to narrate it for us. We're using his channel, so. All right, so here comes the meltdown. Well, by the way, also, wouldn't you just leave if you legitimately were the director of worldwide research and development, strategic operations, and mRNA scientific planning for Pfizer, and someone approached you and you knew you were on, wouldn't you just get out? No, this guy had to hang around, and do this.
You really did. Please bring the cops as soon as possible. I'm feeling very unsafe.
He said, I'm feeling very unsafe.
No, don't let them leave.
And he's asking him to lock the doors. He grabs he's down on his hands and knees, and he's trying to destroy this iPad. Look at him.
Unlock the door.
This is like Jerry Springer.
This
pushed him at the end there? Was that
It's like a Jerry Springer show.
Right. All right. Well, this is, it is. It's like Springer. Come on, folks. Come on. What are we looking at here? This is not real.
Don't know, but it was, obviously.
It was a big altercation there.
Big altercation. Yeah. He was trying to grab stuff. He was trying to destroy things.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but your iPad usually does not have all of the information alone.
It is the classic strategy where what they did with tabloid magazines. So they they put the truth in there with just complete absurdity, so that when you pair the two together, the truth next to the absurdity, you're just like, it's all nonsense. And then you think you're smarter and wiser because you don't buy into the story.
Oh, man. Well,
I don't know if you've checked your card. Director of Research.
Now, there is some skepticism on that claim.
Oh, is there? Is there some skepticism?
Project Veritas has released some documents that indicate that it's true. Some people who are super skeptical on Pfizer and the vaccine are pointing out there's a lot of inconsistencies in this guy's bio. And the question is whether it's actually true that he was that high of a level there. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that's been determined yet.
And that right there is all part of it too, because you've got to have that element of, well, maybe we don't really understand the story, so it's just this confusion.
Look, the way let's see. The way trauma bonding works, the way satanic ritual abuse works is keeping somebody constantly off balance. Just constantly off balance. You're able to they don't know what's real anymore. Well, what's the whole story that they're distracting from us? Most of you are probably clued in to that, but we can refresh your memory here just a little bit. In March of 2020, there you go. Here's some tweets from March of 2020. March and April of 2020, in the course of roughly 5 to 6 weeks, the majority of societies throughout the world were transformed into a pathologized, totalitarian police state. And a campaign of global shock and awe was conducted. You can see that in these tweets. This is from, let's give some credit here, from Consent Factory. They were able to collect these tweets from the time. The masses were locked down inside their homes, where they were subjected to the most massive official propaganda blitzkrieg in human history. Goon squads roamed the streets of Europe, the USA, the UK, Canada, Australia, Asia, the Americas, and elsewhere, beating and arresting people for being outside without permission. Beating and arresting people for not wearing medical enough looking masks. Corporate media around the world informed us that life as we knew it was over and there was now a new normal. And we needed to get used to it. The entire official narrative was rolled out during those first few weeks. Everything. Masks. Mandatory jabs. Vaccine passports. The segregation of the unvaccinated. The censorship and demonization of dissent. Everything. The whole new normal package was rolled out right then and there. All at once, globally. If your memory of what happened is a little hazy, then you can have a look at this tweet. Let me drop this. I'll drop this into the live chat right now. And we'll try to, for those of you watching on replay, we'll try to maybe put it in a comment. I'll try to put it in a comment under the video. I don't want to put it in the description for obvious reasons. But there you go. Did that make it in there?
It did.
All right. So there's a link to this. It's just a collection of tweets from March and April of 2020 that kind of, show you what the atmosphere, if you maybe you've forgotten. A lot has happened, right? This is the documenting the initial shock and awe campaign. But that is the story. How that happened, why that happened, and who or what made it happen. It is not a story about a virus or our government's reaction to 1. It's the story of the radical restructuring of society based on lies and official propaganda executed globally through sheer brute force and systematic psychological conditioning. It is the story of the implementation of our new totalitarian global capitalist reality. The new normal that was announced in the spring of 2020. It's not a story the global capitalist ruling classes can permit to be told except by crazy conspiracy theorists, the science deniers, and other crackpots and extremists. Once again, thanks to C.J. Hopkins for putting that piece together. That was well done for sure. And as you can see, this just goes on and on. It was really just, you can see how it is totally, it's easy to see now, right? For some of us, right from the start. I remember in 2020, it was in February, when it's, to me, whenever they shut down the NCAA tournament, from that moment on, it just felt like, okay, this is not what they say it is. And Summer, you also, right from early on in the first awareness of what was going on in February or March of 2020, realizing that it was not what they said it was.
Absolutely.
Well, it continues. So let's look at a couple more pieces here. What do we got here? Yeah. So from John Rappaport, this is not the big article yet. Summer's got a piece from John Rappaport that she's going to be covering for you in detail here. But this is about cardiac symptoms. Right? 17% of male teens, in a study had some kinds of symptoms after their second, well, how deep should I go on this? Well, what should I say? Look, at this point, after their second Pfizer jab, let's just say it.
Well, you could go back to saying the injectables again.
I guess.
You've said everything else, though.
It doesn't even matter. As of now, actually, we are officially off our probation period from our last community guidelines strike as of February 3rd. So who knows? At any moment, it could come down again. But you know why we got that strike? We don't know why we got that strike. A video about simulation theory, about whether the universe is a computer simulation or not. I don't know what I said. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was being cavalier, but you just don't know. They don't tell you why your video got removed. They don't tell you why you're being punished. That is also a tactic of control. Anyway, this new study, recently published, peer-reviewed study, it echoes other findings of significant rates of heart problems following these injectables, particularly in young males. Almost 1 in 5, mostly male teens, showed symptoms, cardiac, after their second Pfizer injection.
The drama.
I know. My instinct is to be careful, but I don't think that matters. A full 17% of the high schoolers who were studied showed an onset of heart problems after the second jab, including palpitations, chest pain, shortness of breath, and dizziness or fainting, according to research published on January 5th of this year by the peer-reviewed European Journal of Pediatrics. Is that part of the limited hangout? I don't think so. Not in this case. This is I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks, but it seems like this is part of the study that they would rather, or part of the whole story that they would rather you didn't know about. They'd be happy if you knew about it, but they don't want everybody else knowing about it. They're happy if John Rappaport's readers know about this, because even though he has a significant following, it's not mainstream. Well, also, this has happened again. Another young athlete has died. Detroit Lions announced last week former NFL defensive end Jesse Lemonnier has died, 25. It's unclear the cause of death was at this time, but it was sudden, and that's sad. That's it's really it's bad, folks. This is a bad deal, right? This is young men. I don't know. Are we hearing anything about? Are there reports about females?
No, right now all the statistics say that it's young men that are particularly vulnerable.
Wow, how about that?
There is a correlation.
Think about that for a minute, because you know what the other statistic that we talk about here a lot with young men is, right?
White men.
The suicide rate.
Yeah, that's right. White men committing suicide.
Remember, folks, throughout history, when a nation wanted to conquer another people or another nation or city-state or whatever, the first thing they did was they tried to cripple that nation by taking out the young and healthy men, the ones that could fight.
Mm-hmm. They're definitely doing that. It's happening.
Interesting, right? And as we reported to you here a couple weeks ago now, Bailiwick News, that is Catherine Watt, a Gen X Catholic, writing about these times. So we have to be careful not to judge harshly on things like that, but because as far as we can tell, this does not appear to be part of a limited hangout. I could be wrong, but we're going to continue to look at it and keep our brains engaged and be discerning and keep our focus on what's important. But this is, we covered this last week. The United States Constitution, civil and criminal laws have been automatically and secretly preempted by the 1, 2, 3 punch of the World Health Organization's international health regulations of 2005, entered into force June 15th of 2007, by the U.S. Health and Human Services, the HHS, revisions to 42 CFR 70 regarding the public health powers in an emergency, which subordinate the federal government to the Department of Health and Human Services, acting as an agent of the World Health Organization. That entered into force on February 17th of 2017, just in time. And also January 30th, 2020, the World Health Organization Director General, as we covered here and reported for you, declaration of a public health emergency of international concern. Well, that was January 30th of 2020. We weren't reporting that at that time yet. That was a little early. I thought that was 2021, but that was when that was set in place. Look at that. So that's the WHO new health regulations came into force in 2007. A new policy for the U.S. Health and Human Services came into force in 2017, which gave the HHS power over the federal government as an agent of the World Health Organization. And then the January 30th, 2020, the final nail, the World Health Organization Director General declaration of public health emergency of international concern, set all those other things into motion, brought all that up, and since January 30th of 2020, the United States of America has been under the control of the World Health Organization by proxy through the Department of Health and Human Services. That is why they continue to reinstate the emergency, the public health emergency, every 90 days. The constitutions and charters have been legally suspended since January 30th of 2020, but most populations don't realize that yet because their official leadership, presidents, governors, lawmakers, and judges don't even know themselves or know, and they're not saying it. And that's why some of the reports we've seen recently, the Princess of Thailand in a coma, and the idea that somehow the government of Thailand is going to break their contracts with Pfizer or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what it's like in Thailand, but I know one thing. That contract could not be broken here in the U.S. because it's a military operation. Right? All of this has been done in the name of national security. If the U.S. Constitution and American laws and courts have been privately preempted, well, they need to be publicly reestablished. Okay, that's quite a bit for you there. We added that on at the last minute because we couldn't leave it out. So maybe we'll clip this out, and because we got nanotech here for you for the rest of this show. But it all works together. This is all the same. It's all the same story. I'm going to define some terms before we hand it over to Summer for her presentation here for this research in the current science of nanotech and what that means for jab technology. So let's look at some definitions. What are we talking about when we're talking about nanotechnology, nano-terrorism? Or nanotechnology. We're not talking about Mork from Ork. Right. So this word, nano, introduced in 1947 as a prefix for units of 1,000 millionth, which is now known as 1 billion, comes from the Greek nanos, which means a dwarf. Originally, little old man, or from nanos, and on and on. And so then we have nanoparticle. Nanoparticle is a thing whose size is smaller than 100 nanometers. And we'll keep reminding you throughout the show just how small. You can't conceive of how small that is. But 1 nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. A million. Nanotechnology is science, science, engineering, and technology conducted at the nanoscale. So it's science, engineering, technology that's conducted at this size, which is so small, you can't see it.
Yeah, isn't it described of if you took 80 and 100,000 nanoparticles and you set them side by side, they would end up being the width of a single human hair.
Yeah, say that again. Say that one more time just so it sticks.
So if you took between 80 and 100,000 nanoparticles and you set them side by side, they would add up to the width of a single human hair.
Yeah, this is crazy. So nanoscience and nanotechnology are the study and application of extremely small things and can be used across all other science fields such as chemistry, biology, physics, materials science, and engineering, medicine, of course. Physicist Richard Feynman is considered the father of nanotechnology. The ideas and concepts behind nanoscience and nanotechnology started with a talk he gave at an American Physical Society meeting at Caltech on December 29th, 1959, long before the term nanotechnology was used. In the talk, Feynman described a process in which scientists would be able to manipulate and control individual atoms and molecules. Let me show you another. Yeah, here it is. Francis Fukuyama, his quote: "If we start transforming ourselves into something superior, what rights will these enhanced creatures claim?" So this is about transhumanism, which plays in here as well. So Feynman describes a process in which scientists would be able to manipulate and control individual atoms and molecules. Now, over a decade later, In his explorations of ultra-precision machining, Professor Norio Taniguchi coined the term nanotechnology. It wasn't until 1981, with the development of the scanning tunneling microscope that could see individual atoms, that modern nanotechnology began. So it's hard to imagine just how small nanotechnology is. As Summer said, 1 nanometer is a billionth of a meter. Some illustrative examples. There are 25,400,000 nanometers in 1 inch. Now, the particles we're talking about are smaller than that. That just gets you into qualifying as a nanoparticle.
Yeah, it's creating new life at the molecular atomic level is the claim.
Right, and that's because these elements have unusual properties. Whatever their physical properties are at I guess we could say at normal size, it's completely different at the nano level. Like a sheet of newspaper is about 100,000 nanometers thick. On a comparative scale, if a marble, now just get this, if a marble was a nanometer, if you had a particle that was a nanometer in diameter and it was a marble, then 1 meter would be the size of the Earth. Think about that. That's how small, that's the scale we're talking about here. Everything on Earth is made up of atoms. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the buildings and houses we live in, and our own bodies. But something as small as an atom is impossible to see with the naked eye. In fact, it's impossible to see with the microscopes typically used, high school science classes. The microscopes needed to see things at the nanoscale only came into existence, as we said earlier, in the 80s. So, with the invention of the scanning tunneling microscope and the atomic force microscope, the age of nanotechnology was born. Although modern nanoscience and nanotechnology are quite new, nanoscale materials have always been around and have been used for centuries. Alternate-sized gold and silver particles created colors and stained glass windows of cathedrals and medieval churches. And this is hundreds of years ago. The artists back then didn't know that the process they were using to create these amazing works of art was nanotechnology. They didn't know that the process they were using actually led to changes in the composition of the materials they were working with. But that is what happens in nanoscience. The composition of the materials is actually altered. In other words, transmutation. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but that's the way I understand it. Transmutation, when you turn one element into another element. Today's scientists and engineers are transmutation. If you just want an idea, that is alchemy. When we want to change base metals to gold, that would be transmutation. So it's here. Today's scientists and engineers are finding a wide variety of ways to deliberately make materials at the nanoscale to take advantage of their enhanced properties. Some of the enhanced properties that you find are higher strength, lighter weight, increased control of the light spectrum, and greater chemical reactivity than the larger scale counterparts. Okay, and so now nanobots. Nanobot is a kind of engineering that's defined as the engineering of smart functional systems at the molecular scale. The Nanotechnology Dictionary at nanodic.com defines nanotechnology as the design, characterization, production, and application of structures, devices, and systems by controlled manipulation of size and shape at the nanometer scale. Atomic, molecular, and macromolecular scale. That produces structures, devices, and systems with at least one novel superior characteristic or property. Okay. Now, here's where the rubber hits the road. Here's where the rubber hits the nanoscale. The word quantum, the word has its origins in the 1600s. It just means sum or amount, or extent, how great an extent. The word quantum was introduced in physics directly from Latin by Max Planck in 1900 on the notion of, quote, minimum amount of a quantity which can exist. Like, so what is the smallest particle that can exist? That's the idea of the word quantum. Quantum theory is a word that found its origin in 1912. Quantum mechanics came about in 1922. The term quantum jump, meaning an abrupt transition from one stationary state to another, 1954. Quantum leap, Scott Bakula, right? Quantum leap. Just means a sudden large advance. That term found its origin in 1960. I can't believe I remembered his name. Scott Bakula. Where did that come
well
from?
Done.
Wow. Right?
Self-applause.
Here we go. Scott Bakula. Oh, that's the old stuff. There's a new... Oh,
not Dracula, but...
Not Count Dracula, but Scott Bakula.
Basically doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Death is a doorway. We shed one skin and put on another and leap.
Of course it's me. You think I'm gonna let you go through this alone? Now look at me.
You're the big city man. You figure it out.
Al, I used to be a doctor. I can't help him die.
I bled him till the snow turned red. He looked like you.
What is wrong with me? I spend half the time saying I'm sorry and the rest of the time cleaning up my mistakes.
Why are you here?
I can't let you marry a man you're not in love with. You can't lose sight of your own happiness. What if there's nothing beyond the door?
Then I would fight to hang on to this skin as hard as I could.
Don't look at me. I'm out of here.
Come on, everybody. Let's give it a hand for Count Dracula. Scott Bakula. Okay, all right.
What year was that?
90s.
Just the 90s.
Dr. Sam Beckett.
Wow.
He stars as a physicist caught in a time warp who leaps into the bodies of different people in different time periods in order to put right what once went wrong. We need Dr. Sam Beckett here today.
They love that narrative too, you know, with shows like Fringe, and there are just so many shows where they do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, quantum. All right, so the idea here, you know, is that it is proposed. Who knows what's going on?
Back to the Future.
Yeah. Nobody knows really what really happens in the quantum realm because no one can see it. We don't really even have equipment to measure what goes on there. We're talking about particles. We're talking about a realm. It's not a technical term. The quantum realm is not a technical term. It gets used all the time in fiction, comics, frequently in science journalism it's used, but real physicists don't use it unless maybe they're talking to the lay public. But in fiction, the term quantum means whatever the author wants it to mean, like right here. So this is Sam Beckett is a time traveler. and he's able to jump into other people's bodies based on.
Well, maybe now would be a good time to mention that phone app called Healy, Healy, and it's a phone app, and it claims that through frequencies it can determine like the state of health of all of your internal organs and at what percentage, each individual one, like the liver is operating at this percent and the heart is operating at this percent. And then it claims that it can give you healing frequencies if you just let it, like, you hit the program button and then you let it heal you. Healy.
Yeah.
Craziness, man.
Yeah, here it is. Here's a little.
Choose from gallery, whichever one. I'm not going to do that. And then male or female.
Okay, it's setting up a
scanning that this does. It has a resonance analysis and the aura analysis. The aura analysis is going to scan
the aura analysis, right? Because
and then the resonance analysis is going to scan for the specific areas in your body that are holding, energetic block.
And that is, of course, obviously, because Healy is able to function at the quantum level.
Yeah, I mean, normally we're being told to keep our phones away from our bodies, right? But like this is claiming that you're going to get healing frequencies from this app on your phone.
Frequency is, there's definitely, there's a point there. Frequency, that's how electricity works on frequency. Frequency is real, and it affecting us is real. That's why 5G is a big fear, because of the frequency that it operates at.
But healing frequency.
Oh yeah. Well, Nikola Tesla, that's what they're all operating on. They're all working in some theory here, but it's plausible. Let's put it that way. It's plausible.
To have an aura reading? To have an aura reading?
Well, no, obviously. You see, that's where the New Age goes batty, but, but the quantum realm here, this is what's being taken advantage of. Nobody really knows what that is. It's not a place, even though it sounds like it should be one. It's just an expression for the fact that very small things like atoms and smaller work differently than the large things that make up our everyday experiences. It's like the laws of science seem to change. They only seem to change because we're just not aware of what happens at that level. It's always been happening at that level. But given that the field is almost totally unregulated, we'll talk about this more in a minute. But given that the field is almost totally unregulated, there are and will be countless scams with snake oil vendors selling you the latest nano this or that. And we'll jump right in now to John Rappaport's latest article about nanotechnology, nanoscience, nano-vaccine technology. So, Summer, take it away.
Sure. Well, first up, I'd like to just sort of give a shout out to, I think it's Camille over at Please Stop the Ride, and Tony Pantelleresco.
Oh, you got a Tony. I think he teleported out of his. I
know. I think he has a blog or something, but he hasn't been on YouTube for quite a while.
Herbs and Bead. What's it called?
Herbs plus Beadworks. But I've been listening to Tony for years, and he was talking about nanotech and how to get rid of it out of your body.
There he is.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a character.
Man, a lot of the stuff that he has said has been spot on.
Exactly. That's what they want you to think. They want you to, well, look at this guy. This guy looks crazy. You can't trust anything he says. That'll get you in trouble.
Well, so when this article came into our radar about John Rappaport's work with nanotechnology, I perked up because, I don't know, just like what I said, for quite a while, I've been checking out the work of Please Stop the Ride and Tony Pantelleresco. They've been talking about nanotechnology, and so John Rappaport, most of you guys know who this is. He's a veteran investigative journalist, and he's got a really good handle on what's going on.
We've been, just to jump in there, we've been covering or working with John Rappaport's work many years. But one of the reasons it started a YouTube channel years ago was to talk about vaccine technology, to talk about the problems of the vaccines. my history was as a working speech pathology, doing speech therapy with traumatic brain injury patients, stroke patients, and a lot of children, mostly children, who were on the autism spectrum. So I got to hear like hundreds of anecdotal cases of where after a certain set of inoculations, suddenly this child who was developing normally stopped talking, changed completely. And then this is where they become, it's a neurological disorder, autism, and it can affect the child at different, on a spectrum. So John Rappaport has been covering, it's now for about 40 years he's been covering the health industry. And very quickly, he started out, writing for mainstream outlets, and pretty quickly that ended because he was doing real journalism. So that's a little setup there. We've been following Rappaport for a long time, and especially since the start of this crazy, weird pandemic thing. And I think that's probably why, for myself, when it first started, we just kind of knew right away this is not what they're telling us it is. So I have a lot of trust in Rappaport's work. And so go ahead and take it.
Yeah, so researching the current science of nano is difficult. The first thing you'll notice while reading published papers on nanotechnology is that the language is very dense and very technical, meaning that the public is at a very great distance from what is going on. So a big issue is this industry is largely out of view from the public. There is no regulation on this industry. And aside from the considerable problem of trying to understand what is going on, you can see right away that whatever controls exist on the research are being managed by scientists themselves, and certainly not by us, not by government bureaucrats who lack expertise to understand the details. And when you try to research the nanotech industry, it's very hard to separate the research that's taking place and the fictions they are trying to sell to raise money for the funding, right? And to gain that public acceptance that they need. So this blurring between what is actually possible and actually known, and then with them trying to tout like this is the possibilities of it, so that they can continue getting the backing, right? So yeah, so you were going to bring up the dangers.
Was I? I was going to talk about the dangers.
Yeah, and the unregulated Wild West.
Oh yeah, unregulated. Sorry about that. I was looking at Camille's YouTube channel here. Please stop the ride.
Or we could go ahead and go into the dangers, but you were going to talk about disease management.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. The idea here, folks, what Summer has reminded me of. Yes.
That's all right. It's late.
Listen carefully to what is said when this technology, whether it's vaccine technology or whether it's some kind of new medicine, nano medicine, especially with nanomedicine, what you're going to be hearing is the management of disease. These are new advancements for the management of disease. I wonder if I have that piece here. Yeah. Management of disease. That's because you don't hear them talking in terms of cure. You hear treatment sometimes, but as we move on through this, as this new world opens up more and more, you're going to be hearing management of disease. What that means essentially is
they want access.
You're going to have a disease.
They want access to you.
Yeah, according to their cancers are going to be patented, right? If you can patent the cure, certainly they're going to try to patent the disease. What kind of cancer do you have? Well, that kind of cancer happens to be patented for this pharmaceutical company's medications. Or now, at least up until recent history anyway, you could not patent anything that was from nature. after what we've seen happen the past few years, I'm not confident that is still that's still in effect. But that's just essentially that's the point. Mm-hmm. Listen carefully for that. The management of disease, as opposed to let's find out what causes it and cures it. No, let's manage it. Let's keep it there. Like people live for 20, 30 years with cancer now. That's because it's big business to treat that stuff. So that's just the only point I had there. That's what you're going to hear a lot with this this industry.
So Rappaport goes on to say in his research that medical journals say that they don't know how to form good safety testing, like how to put nanoparticles safely inside the body, and conventional medical literature, it states that nano is dangerous. But the powers that be went ahead and injected billions of people with this tech anyhow. Researchers have been using this tech to pierce the blood-brain barrier, and so that's obviously an issue. Do you want to expound on blood-brain barrier?
Yeah, so blood-brain barrier is...
Try saying that really quickly 3 times in a row.
Well, be careful with it, too. So the blood-brain barrier is that stage along the track of your circulation of your blood where particles either remain in the bloodstream or are able to go into the brain. That is we can call it a filter that the body has to keep certain things from getting to the brain. Here you go. Here's a short primer on that.
Welcome to 2-Minute Neuroscience, where I simplistically explain neuroscience topics in 2 minutes or less. In this installment, I will discuss the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is a complex that surrounds most of the blood vessels in the brain. It acts as a barrier between the bloodstream and the extracellular space of the brain, allowing only certain substances like water, oxygen, and small lipid-soluble substances to easily cross from the blood into the brain.
Lipid-soluble substances. So that's what we need. If we want to get into the brain, now there are drugs that do cross that, so let me just let him tell you.
This prevents toxins, pathogens, and other potentially dangerous substances from crossing from the circulatory system.
But if we can get a toxin or a pathogen to a nanoscale, perhaps we could get that into the brain. Now, I'm not, am I being too cynical?
Into the brain. It is thought that the central components of the structure of the blood-brain barrier are the tight junctions of endothelial cells, the cells that make up the interior surface of blood vessels. In other blood vessels throughout the body, there are small spaces between these endothelial cells. Small blood-borne substances can pass through these spaces and into surrounding tissues. The endothelial cells that make up the blood-brain barrier, however, are fused tightly together to form tight junctions that restrict diffusion across the blood vessel lining. Glial cells called astrocytes also have projections called astrocytic end feet that extend to the walls of blood vessels that are part of the blood-brain barrier. Astrocytic end feet often completely surround blood vessels in the brain and are thought to play critical roles in the formation of the blood-brain barrier. For example, they seem to be involved with signaling that prompts endothelial cells to form the tight junctions necessary to create the blood-brain barrier, and they are believed to have multiple functions involving the maintenance and regulation of the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier protects most of the blood vessels in the brain, but there are some areas that lack a blood-brain barrier, allowing substances to pass from the circulatory system to the brain and back. For example, the circumventricular organs are a group of structures lacking a blood-brain barrier that are centered around the ventricles of the brain. These structures are thought to be lacking a blood-brain barrier because their functions require access to the bloodstream. The posterior pituitary gland, for example, has to be able to release hormones directly into the bloodstream.
Okay, so there you go. There's a primer.
Right.
So basically what you want to take away from that is it's not intended for everything to flow from your bloodstream into the neurons in your brain.
And the point is that drug delivery systems that go past the blood-brain barrier could be good.
Yeah, it could be.
It could be, but there's no safety evaluations that exist to make sure nothing dubious is going to happen. Yeah. So the health impact of this nanotech has the characteristic of randomness too, since they are carried through the bloodstream and it's not known where they will most end up in the body. So there's a randomness effect in how this will affect each person. So it's like it's a killer that wears many invisible masks, right? Because you don't know where it's going to settle within the body and cause issues. And then the consequences can be fatal, right? Or they could just create injury. So it's sneaky that way. I would use the word biological warfare, really. And certainly, of course, one of our favorite terms, plausible deniability. Yeah. Because you give people this technology, it's very subversive. Like it comes in, it's super tiny. You can't really, it's hard to prove. And then it creates like a reaction that you can't, it just looks like all these people suddenly getting sick, right? Increased mortality. So nanoparticles deliver drugs into the cells, and it's easy to get highly toxic drugs into the body that way. And once again, you can't detect when they go in. It obscures things. So the way that they are selling this tech to the population looks a little bit like this. If you want to grab those two Business Insider articles talking about DARPA.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'll grab them.
Yeah, DARPA. So DARPA plans to, this was back in, let's see. So the first
Which one? You want the
U.S. military wants to microchip troops.
Oh, yeah.
May 2012. So this is quite a while ago.
All right.
But there you have them talking about, seen and heard in the press, DARPA plans to create nanochips for monitoring troops' health on the battlefield, supposedly targeting supposedly trying to prevent illness and disease. That's always their thing, right?
Right. Well, look, DARPA. Let's just make this.
Well, it's always like the handicapped person, or
DARPA,
the person with Alzheimer's, or
DARPA's purpose. DARPA was created by Congress in 1958. They're called the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Yeah.
It is the central research and development arm of the Department of Defense. Who is running the pandemic response? The Department of Defense is. Okay. So
there's that.
It's really,
here they are. Yeah. Well, you go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna tell a little bit about DARPA. I hadn't planned to do this, so that's why I'm catching you off guard here. So sorry about that.
That's all right.
But I've been sitting on this DARPA here for a little while, and this is a good chance to bring it out. It's important to note here that the analogous nature of the development of certain non-governmental, much like Federal Reserve, was created through influence over Congress by international commercial bankers. So just because Congress has created DARPA, that doesn't mean that it came from the people. The Congress can be influenced to set up, just like CIA. You could call the commercial bankers who were influenced and caused the Federal Reserve to be set up. You could call them a cartel. And there was a series of financial panics that caused that made that. They were also not organic. They were manufactured to provoke a desire for central control of the monetary system by these same banksters in order to alleviate financial crises. So DARPA was created in the same sense by Congress for a specific purpose. Official legend holds that DARPA was created to prevent another Sputnik. And to this day, patriotic dogma testifies that DARPA's faithful objective is to prevent liberty from ever being caught off guard again by the technological, scientific advances of other nations or people. So, in 65 years, DARPA has grown to become the Defense Department's most secret, most powerful, and most controversial military science research and development agencies. Now, here's the point. DARPA's explicit mission. This is what's relevant to what Summer's telling you here. DARPA's explicit mission is now, as it always has been, quote, to create revolutions in military science and to maintain technological dominance over the rest of the world. Okay, that's what they do. They create revolutions in military science. Okay, now, just so you know, that's it. That's what DARPA does. They make weapons, and DARPA was instrumental in the vaccine production in 2020 or probably before that. But so this is just another piece of It's another point to put in the board as this picture develops, where we can see that these are not medicines, right? These are countermeasures. They are biological weapons, right? You could, if you use it on your enemy, you call it a weapon. If you use it at home, you call it something else. But it's not a medicine. It's a countermeasure. All right. Sorry about this. So go ahead.
No, I appreciate that. That's good setup. Yeah. So again, it's just the way that they are selling this tech to the population. Again, this article is out in 2012, and it's stating that they want to put these nanochips into the troops to monitor the health of the troops on the battlefield. And what they're talking about, some of the talking points here, is brain-machine interfaces, implanting nanosensors in the body to monitor the body in real time, to receive inputs from nanosensors. So whether you like it or not, they want to control us from external. So be able to, I guess, tweak the nano that's inside of you to make you start working again, right? This is this idea of the tiny particles implanted in the body that report out what the body is doing, and then they can impose corrections to your body from an external location. And so they're talking about, they're talking about chips, but doesn't this sound an awful lot like what nanotech could do?
Yeah.
Right? So, and then we hear about Harari saying under the skin. And then the other article is a sensor injected under the skin backed by DARPA is meant to spot COVID-19 days before symptoms appear. So that article shows up in Business Insider back in April of 2021.
Okay, so that's the
So let's take a look at that one. Because
yeah, I've got the DARPA website up here, folks. You can see it right there. DARPA continues to work closely with the Department of Defense, multiple U.S. government agencies, as well as its academic and industry partners to provide technical and scientific solutions to address the COVID-19 pandemic. DARPA makes weapons. So, and this is just from the DARPA website. They're not hiding it from you. It's nothing they feel like needs to be hidden.
Yeah, that was a point, too, that Rappaport made, is that if you just look at all the research that's out there about nanotechnology, you don't even have to go on, Rumble or Odyssey or anything squirrely. Like you can determine, looking at the available research out there, that this is a really scary idea.
Yeah.
And it's unregulated. So
unregulated. Yeah, that's the thing. Imagine DARPA is able to work with, well, they're already unregulated because they're creating weapons systems, but now they're able to create, they're just experimenting on the population, experimenting on the citizens.
Well, and they've got everybody like, look, wait for the microchip. But actually, they've already implanted it through the injectables, right?
Yeah. I got there's the Business Insider article for it.
Okay. Yeah, just cruise through there.
All right.
Yeah, there it is. It's short and sweet.
There you go. Oh, how about that? Let's go ahead. I've got, you know where I'm going now.
Read it.
I'm going to, hang on here.
The tiny sensor, which was backed by DARPA, can be injected under the skin.
Yeah, hang on.
Yeah, so again, it's this idea, once again, this constant monitoring. Constantly monitors whether the body is sick and can transmit a signal to a sensor, detects the infection 1 to 2 days before symptoms appear. See how it's the same...
Under the skin, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
Now, why is this? Okay, look. Yeah,
Ferrari.
Let's look at that was me. So the tiny sensor, which was backed by DARPA, can be injected under the skin, constantly monitors whether the body is sick and can transmit signal to a sensor, detects COVID-19 infections 1 to 2 days before symptoms appear, if you say so, but it's more about surveillance, right? This relationship with the Club of Rome, significant. The Club of Rome, what am I doing here?
Yeah,
has
described. You know what it makes me think of?
Against
that movie,
common
Ad
enemy.
Astra. I don't know if you guys have seen Ad Astra with Brad Pitt. Amazing cinematography in that movie, but he's constantly being monitored throughout that.
Oh yeah, so yeah. Well, that's now. We're going to be doing some a little bit of material on predictive programming for you here very soon on this channel, because I've found the material. I've found I don't like to just go. I need to know what I'm talking about before I come here and tell you about it. So I've got my research on predictive programming together now. We're going to be sharing that with you soon. But listen to this with what Summer just read you.
This is your first ever children's book. Yes. Unstoppable Us, How Humans Took Over the World. Why was it important for you to write a book for younger readers?
Because I wanted to really help them understand the world.
Fake news have been with us for thousands of years. Just think of the Bible. All this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news.
And help them understand who they are.
Humans are now hackable animals.
But this is the biggest question maybe in the life of every kid.
Not the intelligent design of some God above the clouds, but our intelligent design.
What am I?
Humans are now hackable animals.
The world is so complicated and sometimes frightening.
You know, the whole idea that humans have this soul, okay, this is my free will, that's over.
Because I wanted to really help them understand the world.
A new regime of surveillance. The next phase is the surveillance going under our skin. The most important development of the 21st century, this ability to hack human beings.
Help them understand who they are.
To go under the skin, collect biometric data, analyze it, and understand people better than they understand themselves.
Hackable animals.
Armor of truth.
Yes, indeed. Armor of truth. Well, woo. And so it's, but it's just conspiracy theories. Right? It's just conspiracy theories.
Yeah, one of the tips that Rappaport gave is just Google.
Yeah, you don't have to work hard.
Just put it in there and then look around, have a look around. And there's so much money being pumped into this industry. I know people, in fact, that are have been trained up just to get ready to do the surface cleaning, like to do a surface cleaning program, where it's through nanotechnology, where they can guarantee that their building is going to be sterilized. So you can hire companies now that'll come in and install nanotech onto your surfaces, so you never have to clean anything. That's happening. And then just if you go to a market, like say like a Sunday market, they're out there peddling nano sprays that, just 2 sprays and let it air dry, and you'll be able to get all the magnesium that you need, or, different vitamins, B vitamins, magnesium. It's definitely everywhere. And so that's it's very much a buzzword. It's a buzz concept. So what better way to hide the insidiousness of it than to just have that name everywhere?
Nano this, nano that.
Nano this, nano that.
Self-cleaning surfaces are also a, let's see here, let me get I'm not moving as fast as I should be. That's another tip. We're here talking to you about the medical and scientific, or the medical.
Yeah, that's a different application,
but just to let you know,
across the board throughout the
it's specifically in medical science, where this is it's unregulated here, as well as in medical science. But this gives you an idea of what's going on. This is why you have to be careful for hucksters. Nobody can see down at the quantum level. Nobody can see at the nanoscale. So you don't know if what they're telling you is true or not, but here's an example.
Here to dig a little deeper about what's been going on in his company and how it can benefit you. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you. So your company, Nanotouch Materials, produces a line of self-cleaning surfaces. Can you give us a quick explanation of what that means?
Sure. What they are is a surface that continuously oxidizes organic material. Okay. Any organic material that's on the surface, it breaks it down into its base components, water, carbon dioxide, things like that. So that's basically what a self-cleaning surface is.
Now that's what bleach does too. It oxidizes things it touches. That's why it's a good disinfectant. But let's listen to this a little more. This guy, he does make some good sense. as it goes on.
Wow, this is amazing. This sounds so great. So
The poor reporter she's befuddled the whole time. She doesn't know what she's talking about, but she does fine.
so how fast does a self-cleaning surface product work? Like, how does that happen?
Well, we've been doing a lot of research, obviously, with this grant, produced some really interesting data. That data has started coming in. The interesting thing is one of our recent tests, like on Staph A, one of the pathogens, had a 96% reduction in 2 hours. Okay. Another test completely eradicated the human coronavirus in under 30 minutes. And so,
okay, we made this point the other day. This is 4 years ago, right? And he's talking about the human coronavirus, and a lot of people don't understand this coronavirus is not.
It's always been around.
Yeah, it's not new. It's the common cold. It's the virus that causes the common cold, and so you can see a Lysol can from 30 years ago will kills coronaviruses. But let's see. So let's keep going here.
So the interesting thing about those stats is they don't mean that much on their own. And in fact, we have people ask us, well, if I have a person in front of me touch a door handle and deposit germs, and I come after them 5 minutes later, can I pick up germs? Of course you can, definitely. But I would follow up and ask them, how many germs is that normal door handle killing? Oh. And the answer is actually worse than zero. You know, the million bacteria I put on that door handle now turns into 10 million bacteria very quickly. So we see a tremendous opportunity for self-cleaning surfaces that work continuously, they're always on, to supplement the performance of one-time kills like disinfectants and your traditional cleaners.
Wow. So could we just apply titanium dioxide to every single surface so our entire environment, our whole planet could just be self-cleaning, self-efficient and everything like that? Is that possible?
That's a good question.
Okay, so this is the point
that's like where we're at now is everybody wants everything sanitized.
Yeah, we were.
Even though that's a really bad idea.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day when we were looking at some of the clips we were going to play for you. And he addresses it right here. He does a good job of addressing it because you don't want that environment. You don't want a sterile environment because we're covered in bacteria, good bacteria.
Except that now the narrative has changed and they want you to believe that that's a good idea.
Right. And you know why? Because if you keep sterilizing your environment, you're just going to get sicker. And that is really what they're after, is to keep you managing your diseases.
You know, it is possible, and it's actually being done in some situations. For example, a hospital operating room. You want to kill everything.
That's about the only place it makes sense to
except the patient, right? So that's a place where having a sterile environment is a very positive thing. However, our mission, which is to create cleaner, healthier environments in which to live, work, and play, if we look at the idea of creating a completely sterile environment, what I'm about to say is going to sound counterintuitive. We don't want a sterile environment. Many of the microbes in our environment are very good. They're beneficial to us. In fact, a recent study showed that in the human body, microbes outnumbered our own cells 10 to 1. So we need those microbes. We don't want to create a sterile environment. In fact, creating a sterile environment would go against creating a healthier environment.
Yeah, so then what did you see early on in this pandemic? Let's see. Disinfecting everything. Just spraying it all over. Look at this. That's in China. Drones spraying disinfectant all over the place. You know, as if that's the right thing to do. They're just, you know, it's assumed that that's the way we should handle it. And you can see them spraying throughout their streets. Disinfectant. There you go.
Many people have expressed their disappointment after a city in China announced extreme measures to fight the COVID-19 epidemic. Officials in Dandong City, Liaoning Province, released a message in April.
So it's just as if that's normal. That's the way you handle things now. Nano bandages for wound healing. Also, spray on nanofiber skin could revolutionize.
It's like greenwashing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So everybody invest in this quick, everybody invest in this like nanotech for all these different applications. But by the way, we don't know what it really will do. And the other point was, where is it? They aren't biocompatible and they aren't biodegradable. So
right, that's the big problem.
Once they're in you, like what goes on next? You know,
that's the elephant in the room right there.
Right.
They don't know what's going to happen. Those were the big 3 points, right? Some of that, the idea that the research is very difficult because the language is so dense, and only certain approved labs and scientists are allowed to work on, when it comes down to medical science.
No safety evaluations exist.
No safety evaluations. And of course, for the big vaccine rollout, no testing. In fact, the government didn't order any testing. Therefore, they, Pfizer and whoever else weren't required to do any, because it wasn't a vaccine; it was a countermeasure. So, is that? Did you get to the end of your piece?
Yeah, that wraps it up. It's just this is real. It's here. It's legit. There's a lot of investigative journalists that are doing really good work on this and that are bringing things to light. And we're literally living now in a time where nanoparticles and the reality of that and how it's changing us, all of us, like animals, humans, plant life, everything. And, once you get all this synthetic technology merged with organic technology, that's the Internet of Things, right? So then everything literally, that's this whole idea of everything becomes connected. It's the Internet of Things, so they can monitor and control all life systems.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive because we were put here. We were made for this time. The Lord put us here for this time. So we have an important task. So when we think about technology and man, technology, God's relationship to technology, man's relationship to technology, I'll share a little bit from you from C.S. Lewis' Abolition of Man. Man's conquest of nature. It looks like this. Man's conquest of nature is an expression often used to describe the progress of applied science. Man has nature whacked. He has figured it out. But in what sense is man the possessor of this increasing power over nature? In what sense has man conquered nature? What we call man's power over nature turns out to be a power exercised by some men over other men with nature as the instrument, right? We're never going to conquer nature, all right? And so it's what is being called, it's what's being understood as these great advancements, and we've figured out how to cure this and that. Transhumanism, what we call man's power over nature, turns out to be a power exercised by some men over other men with nature as the weapon. So there are concerns that underlying quantum mechanics of where these interactions take place hasn't been tested enough and isn't fully understood for use within the living human body.
I was just also going to say, doesn't this also circle back to the black goo phenomenon?
Yeah, I had that. We'll bring that up in a subsequent show.
Yeah,
I had to cut it out because this show was getting too long. But yeah, gray goo / black goo. This is where that comes into the conversation because it has to do with self-replicating nanobots or self-replicating machinery. So stay tuned to the Armor of Truth channel. Lord willing, if we're able to keep broadcasting here.
We did have some really weird, I've never seen our technology do that like tonight, like the way that glitching, that was weird.
I know our setup inside and out. I don't know what that was.
I know, it's really strange. Idea. Maybe we finally got like truly on the radar. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, truly, finally on the radar.
Finally, truly on the radar.
Well, the idea here, one of the fears is, since it's not regulated, nanoterrorism. I don't think we have to worry. Since 9/11, we have been told that our biggest threat is other people. Like, it's Islam. That's our greatest threat. It never was, and it still isn't. Our biggest threat are the men who wield power. As we told you right at the top of the show, this epistemic autocracy, this scientific dictatorship, right, wielding their epistemological weapon against the masses. But we've been warned about this so often. Think of prescient novelists like George Orwell, 1984. Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. They both described in gory detail what such dystopian futures might look like. Another great English writer during the same period was also C.S. Lewis. He's written about this as well. I just shared with you that one quote. In a number of books and articles, he warned about where we were heading as new technologies coupled with increasing statism spelled the abolition of man. And that was the title of his 1947 book. Man's conquest of nature, if the dreams of some scientific planners are realized, means the rule of a few hundreds of men over billions upon billions of men. There neither is nor can be any simple increase of power on man's side. Each new power won by man is a power over man as well. And Lewis went on to write in his Space Trilogy series. It was all about rogue science and unethical technocrats. Now let's see. I told you when you joined us tonight at the top that we would finish up tonight with an explanation, a good theology of technology. How do we think about this as Christians? What is God's relationship to technology, and therefore what is should our relationship to technology, whether it's nanotechnology or quantum mechanics? Do you believe what God has said? Do any of us truly contemplate and actually consider what it means that God is righteous, holy, perfect, all-powerful, having all wisdom? We should. In fact, we must. We must contemplate this. We must. We need to think about this. The attributes of God need to be on our minds constantly, because these eternal truths are the foundation of the Christian faith. This is what helps us to think about the world we're living in now. Is technology evil? Here's another essential Bible truth that is often overlooked, and sadly, based on the view of many professing Christians, especially out here on YouTube, hearing the way they express, what they express about the state of the world today. This truth about God is rarely believed. And that truth is this: all things, good and bad, happen for God's glory and for our good. All things. Now, that's a tough one to swallow if you don't have a solid theology. In other words, know who God is and know who you are and know what God's plan, his redemptive, his plan through all of redemptive history actually is. Essentially, we're talking about the sovereignty of God. If we believe what God has said, if we trust God, that his word is truth, John 17:17, then we need to find out what he has said on technology. Scripture provides for all of us, for all Christians, provides knowledge of God and how he saves lost souls. And for the Christian, God has revealed in the Bible all relevant truth for faith and practice and how a Christian should live, how a Christian should think, and how we should behave in the world. In any age, the Bible is a timeless document. It's inerrant, infallible, God's special revelation to his people. When God created, God interacted with, after creation, everything that God created was completely other. And from that point, at various and sundry times, God has interacted with his creation. One of the ways he's interacted with the creation is to give us the special revelation of Scripture. And since it comes from God in his special revelation, it is therefore fully sufficient for everything we need for faith and practice. And that means it contains all relevant truth. It tells us everything we need to know. It tells us how to think. It even tells us how to manage technology. For a Christian living in the information age, immersed in all the assets and liabilities of industrialism and technological progress, what is needed to navigate this age is a good theology of technology. Theology just means study of God. Theos, the Greek word for God, and logos means discourse or doctrine. So theology then is the science of religion, or the study of God and his relationship to humanity. Technology, the same way, it comes from a Greek root, techne. And so the study of these. I'll talk to you in just a minute about some of the earliest, maybe the first bit of technology that we see in the Bible. So how do we think about technology? The Bible doesn't mention technology, so we could think about technology as gain. We could call technology mammon. It's not necessarily evil. Money is a root of all kinds of evil, but we need it and we use it. So the point is this: is the money, we can substitute technology there, is the technology being used in faith? Is it being used to glorify God, or is it being used in rebellion against God? Matthew 6:24 says, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon could be money, possessions, fame, status, or whatever's valued more than the Lord. Technology could be that as well. So it comes down to this. Is God really sovereign? Is God really in control over nanotechnology? Is he really in control over all of this? See, I better get we're going to need some scripture. We're going to go to, in just a bit, we're going to go to Isaiah 54. So get your Bible ready. But first, we're going to look at Job chapter 1, verses 1 through 22. Really just verse 15. But I'll show you Job chapter 1. We're asking the question, is God surprised? Is God going to have to shut it all down? Has God been caught off guard by the advances in technology? Job chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them.
For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did so continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. The grass withers and the flower fades. This is the word of the living God, and it is eternal, and it is fully sufficient. So you might be asking, what in the world does that have to do with nanotech? Well, verse 15, "The Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck them down, the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." First of all, God always leaves a witness. He always has his remnant. But given the exponential increase in human knowledge in the 20th and 21st centuries, there is often an unspoken assumption that we have explained a phenomenon if we have labeled it. There's often an unspoken assumption that we have explained something if we have labeled it, or if we're able to account for its cause in the natural world, then we like to think we understand it. Well, it's doubtless true that labeling phenomena and figuring out the natural causes of such things as diseases can represent a growth in understanding. Our confidence in our knowledge is often misplaced. We still face many limitations in our ability to figure out the world. For instance, although we have given the label gravity to the force that keeps us grounded on Earth so that we don't go flying off into space, we still do not know exactly what gravity is. We know what gravity does, but we don't really know its ontology. We don't know its beingness. Right? This is the difference between denotation and connotation. In theology, we face a similar difficulty when it comes to the doctrine of providence. We know that the Lord governs all things, but we do not understand fully how God works in and through his creation to accomplish his purposes. Nevertheless, theologians often employ a useful term to explain the reality that God and human beings both act at the same time so that the Lord's plan is fulfilled and our choices are really and truly our own. And that term is concurrence. Concurrence. To explain the reality that God and human beings both act at the same time so that the Lord's plan is fulfilled and our choices are really and truly our own. So this has to do with God's sovereignty and man's free will. The Bible shows no contradiction in this. In essence, the doctrine of concurrence says that two or more parties can act in the same event and produce a given outcome without all parties having the same intent. Job's life is a good illustration of this. This is a good illustration of the doctrine of concurrence. So here in Job chapter 1, we read of three major players in Job's suffering. Satan instigated the suffering by issuing a challenge to the Lord regarding Job's piety. God allowed Satan to bring suffering into Job's life. And then the Chaldeans and the Sabaeans attacked Job's family and stole his livestock. But the intent of each party in producing the same outcome, Job's suffering, was different. Satan intended to discredit Job and by extension to discredit God. The intent of the Chaldeans and the Sabaeans was to enrich themselves. The intent of God was to vindicate Job's faith. God doesn't vindicate himself this way. He vindicated Job in this case. So each of these players was necessarily involved in Job's suffering, but for different reasons and at different levels. There was a concurrence among them that Job should suffer, but each of them had a different reason for this suffering. God's intent was good, is always good. All the other players intended evil. So the doctrine of concurrence helps to explain how God can ordain evil and not be guilty of sin. And this is because we know the attributes of God from Scripture. This is why we need to have a solid theology before we can have a good theology of technology. God has a holy intent in all he ordains. Evil is evil, but the Lord never has an evil intent. And he never does evil himself. He works through the evil intentions of others to fulfill his good intent. One of the best examples of concurrence in Scripture is seen in the death of Christ. God ordained the crucifixion, and evil men, acting of their own free will, brought it about. Both were necessary for Christ's death to take place. But God had the good intent to save his people and exalt his Son for his sacrificial obedience. While the men who killed Christ had the evil intent simply to do away with him, God is sovereign over evil, which gives every evil an ultimate purpose, while God remains entirely good. Now, you can also read about Joseph and his brothers who sold him into slavery. I'd be hard-pressed to prove to me that the story of Joseph wasn't a good story with a good outcome. His brothers sold him into slavery, and they certainly meant that for evil. And it was turned for good. Acts chapter 2, verse 23. Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders and signs that God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. This Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. Judges chapter 14. Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Samson's ill intention, God's plan. Zechariah 11, starting at verse 15. Then the Lord said to me, Take once more the equipment of a foolish shepherd. For behold, I am raising up in the land a shepherd who does not care for those being destroyed, or seek the young, or heal the maimed, or nourish the healthy, but devours the flesh of the fat ones, tearing off even their hooves. Woe to my worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May the sword strike his arm in his right eye. Let his arm be wholly withered, his right eye utterly blinded. That is the Lord. Genesis 50, verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. That is Joseph blessing his brothers, the ones who sold him into slavery. And finally, Isaiah chapter 54. Verses 16 and 17. What is God saying here? What can we take from this? Verses 16 and 17. Behold, I have created the smith. That's like a blacksmith, who blows the fire of coals and produces a weapon for its purpose. I have also created the ravager to destroy. Verse 17. No weapon that is fashioned against you, that is God's people, no weapon that is fashioned against you shall succeed, and you shall refute every tongue that rises against you in judgment. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication from me, declares the Lord. That is Isaiah 54. Now, if you can remember what we talked about the other day, the first big example of technology in Scripture is the ark. That is an example of technology that is, well, it's, first of all, it's commanded by God, but it's produced in faith to God, to glorify God. The ark helped to inspire the technological advances that would lead later on to the aspirational ziggurat of Babel, or the Tower of Babel. And so in building the ark, Noah used pitch or tar to seal it so it wouldn't leak. And at Babel, Same thing. In their tower that they built, instead of mortar, they used this pitch or tar to seal it. It's not because they were trying to get high enough to get into heaven. They were trying to get above the flood that they thought would come again. And they sealed it off. The difference? The ark was technology for God's glory. It was a faithful act. And the post-flood people built the tower in rebellion against God. All of this human engineering was meant to thwart God, or so the Babylonites thought. He dethroned them by confusing their single language and dispersing them across the globe. Now, once again, out on YouTube, or you might hear it from people around, assume that this was God reacting. Oops, look what happened. I better wipe that out. No, it was the plan all along. By multiplying the languages, confusing the languages, and causing them to, they had disobeyed God's order to go out into the earth, to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So they all gathered in one place to do their own thing. By multiplying the languages and spreading mankind across the globe, God introduced new global networks and technologies of communication, travel, and shipping. These industries were now inevitable. New global tensions arose from the confusing of languages. And it is these new global tensions among the humans that help protect us today from these future technological innovations. What I'm telling you here today, folks, is you need not worry that there's ever going to be a one world order. Differing languages represent differing cultures and unique ways of designing cities, towers, and homes. So by confusing their languages, God was essentially reprogramming their sense of self. He reprogrammed how they viewed the world. It caused a multiplication of new religions. What? You mean God caused other religions to form? Of course. Babel even marks the genesis of ethnic animosity. These are just the free will actions of humans working in God's divine plan for redemptive history. So in the multiplication of languages in Babel, God keeps man from forming one truth that's valid for all men. So man's truth from that point forward will only be partial and contested. It will never be unified. Worldview disharmony will be with us until Christ returns. The differences are so potent that they will help restrain us from adopting any one single technology. Read that again. These differences that are born out from all of this, from the confusing of the languages, are so potent that they will serve to restrain us from the people of the world from ever adopting any one single technology. Babel was the product of man's aspiration and innovation, which God intended to hack all along in order to create all the cultures of the earth and to set in place a global subversion that would fracture human aspiration and undermine universal technology adoption in the future. Beginning in Babel, universal consensus was made impossible, and that is good news. But there's another point. Isaiah chapter 54, verses 16 and 17. Behold, I have created the smith who blows the fire of the coals and produces a weapon for its purpose. I've also created the ravager to destroy. But no weapon that is fashioned against you shall succeed. You shall refute every tongue that rises against you in judgment. This is your heritage, says the Lord. Human innovation can only unfold within this context of unalleviated tensions. And this is God's mercy on us. This confusion, is God's mercy on us. But this is a temporary mercy. In Noah, God commanded it. In the ark, God took human engineering and technology and wrote it into the grand story of redemption. But in Babel, God squashed it in the face of human self-glory. He introduced the tensions that utterly thwarted human collaboration. But what about us? That's what we want to know, right? That's how we are. We're self-focused. That's our nature. What about us? Where do innovators come from? God answers this question in Isaiah 54. Illumined by the promise of a new covenant, having forecasted the death and resurrection of his Son, in the chapter before, God claims supremacy over armies. Isaiah has made this point even earlier, back in Isaiah chapter 10 and chapter 13. But here, God makes three incredibly specific claims. Number one, he creates the creators of weapons. He creates the creators of technology. Number two, he creates the wielders of those weapons. Number three, he governs the outcomes of those weaponized warriors, the ravagers. There of verse 16. The ancient blacksmith was the elite tech class of the ancient world. Across ancient cultures, blacksmiths lived together in guilds in order to jealously guard their secrets and adhere to rigid systems of ethics. Their work was suffused with tradition and ceremony and rites of purification, fasting, meditation, prayers, sacrifices, and other acts of worship. Not necessarily, not of God, always. Ancient people called the iron that was used to make these weapons fire from heaven or metal from heaven. That's because the meteor's heavenly origin made the priestly role of the blacksmith even clearer. He was a mediator standing between the iron of heaven and the people of earth, a whole industry standing between the divine realm and the earthly realm. This is where Elon Musk stands today. He is a tool in God's hands. A tool for judgment. Blacksmiths forged tools of war, tools of commerce, tools to ward off spirits. They became a power class of innovators. The smith was the chief innovator of his age. God reigns supreme over every part of it. The blacksmith creates powerful swords, yes, but God created the blacksmith. God introduced skill to work metal into human history. God sanctioned the forge and the anvil. God mixed the meteor's metal and threw them into the earth. The entire metalsmithing guild owes its origin to God as it serves his providence. Do you think that Klaus Schwab knows this? No, he doesn't think this. And then there's the ravager. His omnipotence carries over to those who also wield the weapons, the ravagers, God's omnipotence. So the word ravager is a summary of all of the effects that you would imagine from someone wielding a sword, a spear, or an axe destructively, or any kind of technology destructively. Ruining, breaking, pillaging, seizing, laying to waste, causing blood clots. The repeated Hebrew word in this text for created is bara. It's the same word that's used in the creation account. It's a very specific word reserved for God's work of creation as the sole originator. This Hebrew word bara marks the historical continuation of God's creativity, his creative activity, into the present. So that word has the idea of creating out of nothing and also creating within the created realm. That is God's relationship to the smith and to the ravager. Apart from him, they would never exist. Only by his will and design they do. Both have been ordained by God in his sovereign decree. God governs each creature toward good ends directly, and he governs over all sin and evil indirectly. One more time. God governs over each creature toward good ends directly, and he governs over all sin and evil indirectly. This is the doctrine of concurrence. God is the primary but remote cause of all human action. Humans are the secondary but proximate or near cause of their own actions. So even the scope of the Ravager's destruction, the technocrats' destruction, is sanctioned by God. He governs human technology and how those technologies are used, even the destructive ones. He does all this by something known as secondary causality. Nothing occurs, not even the destroying acts of the enemies of God's people, apart from God himself. This is a heavy, heavy text. It's a heavy thing to try to get your head around if you've never considered this. But if we know, if we believe what God has said, it's not as though he's been caught off guard. It's not as though it hasn't all been foreordained. God not only governs gentle butterflies, fluffy puppies, healing technologies, and life-saving medications, he also wields a greater, more comprehensive governance over everything. God brings well-being, and he creates calamity. Isaiah 45:7. God is the sole origin. Only God can create well-being and create calamity, because only God has exalted himself to a position of utter transcendence. So, the tar and the pitch. Do we waterproof the ark as an act of faith in God, or do we waterproof the tower as an act of rebellion against him? Noah used tar because he was on a journey to find a future promise. Tar sealed his boat and tightened his faith in God. But the Babelites misapplied the tar because in unbelief they waterproofed their fire-hardened bricks to construct a permanent utopia of self-glory. First is a story of God's redeeming grace in the technology of the ark. In and through human technological innovation, the first ever massive ship. Second is a second story of humankind manifesting its sin through technology, the city and tower complex of Babel. The first use of technology was based purely on faith. The second use of technology was based entirely on unbelief. Technology used by a heart of flesh versus technology used by a heart of stone, and God governs both. Now, our theology of technology is off to a good start. There's many other things for us to address. Questions about how industries are born, or where our technology comes from materially, or how our tech relates to the possibilities within the created order. Eventually, we will need to understand what innovations can do for us and what innovations can never do for us. And we must determine what technologies are destructive and what technologies are redemptive. Which ones should we adopt? Which ones should we reject? Because at some point, we have to ask, what's the tar for? What is the nanoparticle for? You can use the tar to waterproof your ark. You can use the nanoparticle to deliver life-saving technology in faith. Or you can use the technology of YouTube and internet to glorify yourself or to glorify some sin, or you can use it in faith to glorify God. You can waterproof your ark in faith, or you can waterproof your tower in unbelief. And we will get to those ethics eventually. The next time we talk to you, we will be talking more about this, about where do these technologies come from, and we'll be helping you to understand these questions, I'm sure. So if you have questions about this, please put them in the comments below. If you disagree with what you heard here, let us know. We want to share this with you because our goal here is to edify you. Our goal here is not to wow you and amaze you with all the weird technologies. We're not that entertaining. We're not that smart. Our goal here is to edify you. Our goal here is to proclaim Jesus Christ as King and to always help you to get to know the triune God better every time you come here, so that you know more and more and more about him, so that your relationship with him grows. If you happen to not be in the faith, I think you're here because God's drawing you to the faith. Leave your questions or your comments below in the comments and let us know what you think. If you have questions about the doctrine of concurrence and or anything else that you've heard here tonight, if you have a question about the gospel, whether you're saved, assurance of salvation, you want to know more about Christ, please don't hesitate to ask. Email us at hello@armoroftruth.net. Just get in touch with us. That's why we're here. Summer from Atlanta.
Thank you. That was indeed very edifying, Brad, as always.
She's my wife. She says that. She's nice.
You're nice. I just wanted to say that, this nanotechnology attempt and the Internet of Things and this whole thing that they're hoisting up and trying to accomplish to elevate humanity, right? It's just a counterfeit. It's a counterfeit. It makes me think of we've been reading James in the Bible, and James 1:18 says, "In the exercise of his free will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, so that we would be a kind of first fruits among his creatures." So we're promised this new earth, and we know that God is faithful and he keeps his promises. And it just is like he's going to keep his promises, and he's brought us forth. He's brought us forth to be a first fruits in the new earth. And so who knows how long this thing will keep going. That's up to God. That's God's sovereignty. But for sure, we're his, and he doesn't lose a single one of us.
Amen to that.
Amen.
I think with our study of James that we're working through this winter and spring, it's a good place to end this up. Count it all a joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials.
Amen.
Knowing, you know this. You know that this testing of your faith produces steadfastness, endurance, perseverance. And then let that perseverance have its effect on you. Because it perfects you. It doesn't make you perfect. It makes you more spiritually mature so that you'll be complete, lacking in nothing. And importantly here, if any of you lacks wisdom, if you have questions, if you don't understand things, let them ask God, who gives generously, abundantly, to all who ask without reproach. And it will be given to him. But ask in faith. Let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that's driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he'll receive anything from the Lord. You can't ask in double-mindedness. That means you can't hold some position or opinion about God or about his redemptive plan and at the same time expect that prayer to be answered, or at the same time expect. You can't be double-minded and serve God at the same time. As we've learned, everyone is working and serving God's ultimate plan for redemption. But are you serving him in faith? Or are you serving him in evil? Right? Is your technology, has it been built in faith to glorify God, or has it been built in rebellion out of unbelief? Good night, Summer from Atlanta.
Good night, Brad from Carolina.
Good night, everyone out
there.
Good
night, everybody. Good night, Saints. Good night, AOT watchers.
God bless you, my friends. Lord willing, we'll see you here again next time, hopefully very soon, for another study in the first chapter of James. I think we've just done it, but we'll do it some more.
We'll do it again, more deeper.
More deeper. That's where we're going to go. God bless you, my friends. We'll see you next time.
See you.
Well, that's a rather interesting position coming from a man on a crusade against the evils of technology.
I'm not against technology, Doctor. I'm against the men who deify it at the expense of human truth.
Armor of Truth. Live.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel and log on. armoroftruth.net.